Hi, James here from Adventure Bike Rider magazine, and welcome to episode 2 of the ABR Garage. In this episode, I'll be catching up with ABR magazine's bike tester Julian Challis to talk about the Trans-Euro Trail, or the TET as it's known. Now, this route takes you along trails and quiet roads across Europe, and it's an absolute gem for adventure bikers. Julian's travelled most of the UK section of the TET, and he's written a series of in-depth travel features that have appeared in various issues of Adventure Bike Rider magazine. Now, you can get instant access to all these features by signing up to the Adventure Bike Rider digital library for just £32.99 per year. You'll get instant access to 10 years worth of adventure biking inspiration, knowledge and entertainment. Simply go to www.adventurebikerider.com/shop. So, without further ado, let's find out all about the UK leg of the Trans-Euro Trail. Hi, James here from Adventure Bike Rider magazine, and welcome to the ABR Garage. This episode is dedicated to the magnificent Trans-Euro Trail, and in particular the UK leg of the route. Now, the TET, as it's known, stretches for almost 32,000 miles across most of Europe, from the tip of Scandinavia right down to almost the tip of Africa, on trails and quieter roads. Now, in the UK, it stretches for 2,619 miles across southern England, up through Wales and across northern England. String it all together and you're in for one hell of an adventure. Now, joining me in this episode of the ABR Garage is a man who knows a thing or two about the TET. He's ABR's bike tester. He's ridden enduro, motocross, adventure rallies. He teaches CBT and rides camera bikes. He is Julian Challis. Welcome to the garage, Julian.
Hi, James. What an intro. I've got a lot to live up to, obviously.
How's it going? How are you doing today?
Yeah, good stuff. Thank you very much. A very tidy garage behind me.
That's it. What's the rest of the garage looking like? Is it as tidy as that?
Absolutely awful. It's all down the other side. So this bit looks nice.
Good stuff. Now, when I was thinking about subject matter for the ABR Garage podcast and video, immediately when I thought of the TET, I thought of yourself, because in various issues of Adventure Bike Rider magazine over the past months and years, you've been riding the UK leg of the TET on various different bikes. So I thought, who better to talk about it? And first of all, could you let us know exactly what is the TET?
Well, the TET is, as you say, it's a collection of roads and trails which will take you all across Europe. As you say, it travels all. It's divided into two parts, essentially, according to their website: the east part and the west part, and they join to come right down to the bottom of Africa, bottom of Spain, nearly into Africa. And it's very much, it was influenced, I think, by the Trans-American Trail, which obviously you can go all the way across America. And the founder was a guy called John Ross, and he had the idea of putting together trails that go across and allow people to explore their countries. So if you go onto the transeuratrail.org website, you will find all the information about it. And there are 33 countries listed on that. Every one country you want, if you want to ride in Andorra, you click on Andorra and you will get a route to ride in Andorra, in the same thing as there's one in Finland and then one in Spain and one in France. So it's a ready-made resource for riders. It's a not-for-profit. It's called a community interest company. So it's nobody's trying to make money out of it. It's purely for the love of riding and exploring on a motorcycle. And it's, as a concept, you cannot fault it. It is just a wonderful gift that John and his linesmen for all the country have given to motorcyclists.
And the linesmen, they're the folks in various different countries that take the lead in plotting a route and riding it and researching it, so that when we go along, it's all legal, it's all rideable, yes. And we can just have fun.
Yeah, and in a sense, that's one of the great things about it, in the fact that one of the things that it scares people off of exploring in countries is not knowing where to go. You don't have a route. Now, there are people who like poring over maps and don't want somebody else to prescribe the route. Absolutely fine, do it yourself. If you're new to adventure riding, new to trail riding, and want to do something like that, you can download and get a route of where to ride. And as you say, it'll be achievable. It'll be on legal roads. You do need to make sure you download the correct one at the time. So always make sure that if you're going to ride the TET, you ride it download the route just before you're meant to go, because there can be changes. Roads could be unavailable, particularly in the UK. There can be TROs, transport restriction orders on it. You need to make sure you get the most up-to-date thing. But once you've got that, plug it into your GPX and follow the route. And you won't be going around in little loops. You will be following a definite route which will get you, if you want, all over the UK or all through Spain or all through France. The linesmen are enthusiasts from each different country. So in the UK, it's a guy called James Hicks, who's connected with Wiltshire TRF, who's done an awful lot of work on there. It shows in the fact that the Wiltshire bit is vast. If you ride the Wiltshire part of the TET,
I've ridden some of it. Yeah,
yeah. You seem to spend about 3 hours on Salisbury Plain, just going in different directions. But each guy has put together a route that will take you through and experience the landscape. It's not every byway in the area, and if you know the area, if you're from the area, you think, well, actually, there's one over there. It's not meant to be every single one. It's just putting together a route which will allow you to explore a country or a region or whatever in a combination of road and off-road. The intention is mostly dirt tracks and dirt trails, but inevitably there are times when there is a little bit more tarmac. They're trying to get as much as possible, but so you're not going on to trying to sort of always find every single one. There are bits that connect up, and in a way that allows you to travel longer distances. If it were all dirt trails, it would be actually quite slow progress. Equally so, there are lots of there's lots of off-road in it, and don't think you can approach it on taking a road bike on those routes, because you're not going to get a road bike along them, and certainly some of them are more challenging than others.
Okay, yeah, so we'll look at, the type of bikes to ride and how to navigate it and things like that in a while. So you touched on, we're looking at some green lanes, some trail, some quieter roads. Is in the UK, from your experience, like how much are we looking at riding on trails, and how difficult are those trails?
I mean, it's round about sort of 60-40 or 50-50 at times. So it's a variation of it. Different parts of it depends on how many byways and off-road routes there are still left in counties. There were changes to the off-road access in the UK more than 10 years ago, which took away quite a lot of the routes. What used to be RUPP RUPs are no longer rideable. They're no longer they're restricted byways. You can't go on them. So there are counties where more lanes were taken away, in which case there's less riding to go on. But equally so, there's plenty there, and the linesmen have found the routes that work for that. So yeah, it's round about 60-40 off-road to road. And the nice thing is, if you're getting a little bit tired with the off-road stuff, then it's on a conventional map. You can just decide where your destination is. Cut out the off-road sections and get to your destination at the end of the night. So, you can ride as much or as little as you want of the off-road sections. But realistically, if you don't want to ride off-road, you probably picked the wrong route.
Fair enough. So we've gone to the website. We've downloaded the GPX route, which you can pop onto your phone or an app or something like that. What is it that you use?
Well, I have to say that when we first started riding the TET in the UK, it's about 3 years, and it's a colleague of mine who runs Bristol Trail and Adventure Bike Collective, Matt Fox, who was the driving force behind us taking it on board. And there's been 3 of us that have been doing it. Matt, and Chris have done most of the sections together, and we've been joined by sort of bit parts, other people coming on for different days and whatever. But Matt tends to use a Garmin, download it onto a Garmin, because he's got a Garmin. I guess that's why he's using it. I haven't got a Garmin, so I tend to have it running on View Ranger, and sometimes as a backup on a secondary one called Bike GPX. So it's useful to have a couple of versions of it, and if you're riding together, that all of you have got the route. So if you get separated or you're not sure about things, and there are View Ranger sometimes doesn't download it quite how you'd want it to. So then it's useful to click over to another app, Bike GPX. It's a really simple one. It just gives you a blank screen with a red line in front of it. And if you're following the route, you're on the red line. If the line goes anything but red, you're off the route. So it's a really simple way of following it along. But obviously, you're going to need say a way of plugging it in to keep that app running all the way down, because running navigation apps on your phone does eat up the battery power. So don't think you can set off and think, well, I've got 100%, it'll do fine. It will eat your batteries. You do need a plug-in to make sure you're charging up on the phone. So if you're riding on a trail bike, when I've done it on smaller trail bikes, I've had to make sure that one of those is wired in, and I've got that in there. But realistically, once it's in there, you know the route there. And the better your app is, it'll show the routes around the outside. So if you get a bit you think you can't get up, or you want to avoid, then you'll want to go to some sort of mapping app to say, okay, that's where the route goes. I'm going to go around the outside to avoid it. An example of that is Salisbury Plain. Sometimes if there's active firing on Salisbury Plain, you go across it for the fear of being hit by an artillery shell. So then it's a good time to look at your map and find a route round the outside.
Use your common sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it must
the red
be
line isn't always right.
Yeah, Salisbury Plain is a particular way where there is a danger of being blown up, and it's best to look at the signs and say, yep, okay, I won't go over that bit. But say once you've got it on the map, the app, different versions work in different ways. Garmin is, as a navigation tool, is very good, but they are expensive, and you've got one on your iPhone or things like that. So it's all possible.
Good stuff. So you've ridden a lot more of the tech than I have, but I've dabbled in some sections, particularly in the southwest of England. Earlier this year, with this summer, had a bit of downtime, and trips abroad and whatnot went on the cards. So I rode some sections of it on a KTM 790 Adventure. I've done some sections on the Yamaha Tenere 700. Both incredible adventure bikes, mid-sized bikes, brilliant off-road, great on the road. I have to admit, though, there were one or two sections where I did wish, even on those bikes, I was on something a little smaller. And I know the tech website does recommend that it's been designed for people on lighter trail bikes and so forth. What have you ridden it on, and what would you recommend to others they tackle it on? And is it suitable for a bigger adventure bike?
I've done it on a variety of bikes. The first section I did was on a Tenere 660, and that was done in the depths of winter, so there was ice on the ground, and but it was relatively dry. So that's kind of helped. If it had been sloppy, wet conditions, then the bigger the bike, the harder it's going to be, and the better rider you need to be. If you're a Dakar hero, then it's not going to be any issue at all. But bearing in mind, we're looking. If you're a mere mortal, then the bigger the bike you take, the harder it may be, certainly in wet conditions. And if you happen to type into the TET Facebook group, you shouldn't do it on a big bike. Oh, the abuse you'll get. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which bike you ride it on. The bigger the bike, you need to be a better rider. If you're on a small bike, you can get away with, but you will get out of situations easier if you're on a lighter bike. But you're quite right. It does say on the thing that it recommends smaller bikes, but acknowledges that if you take on bigger bikes, you might need a better level of skill. And certainly, you mentioned you'd ridden it in the summer, and that's key to it. If you are on a bigger bike, if we are eventually allowed out of our homes and more than 5 minutes away from our house, if we have a long dry summer, then lots of it become much more achievable. People have done the whole through of Strata Florida on big bikes. Now you wouldn't want to take on Strata Florida or all those water crossings on a big bike when the rivers are in spate and whatever. It's hard work on a little bike. But if we have a dry summer and the water's low, yes, it's achievable. Equally so, if you're a really good rider and used to that thing, not a problem at all. There are some sections which will undoubtedly defeat a big bike. They can be really rocky. They can be really narrow. Certainly, if you're on a GS, some of the lanes in the southwest and through Wales are really narrow like that. So if you go in with a GS, you're just going to go and stick the two pots into the side of the lane. But it's a question of looking at the lane and assessing, whether to get it, and sometimes being prepared to admit defeat, turn around and come back. However, if the lane's that big, turning around ain't that difficult. If it ain't that easy if you're on a GSA. So just be prepared to adapt what you're doing. If the lane looks a little bit challenging, there'll be another bit. Just loop back, miss that one out, and go on to the next section. In the UK, there aren't really very, very long lanes. Some of the ones in Wales, yes, you would be caught out on, but then you can turn back and then just meet the guys. If you're in a mixed group, it might be the guys on the bigger bikes will have difficulty, and they'll just meet you at the end of the next section.
And I guess the joy of riding the Trans Euro Trail, that if you are, if you have a bigger bike or a trail bike, but you're new to green laning, you don't know the ins and outs of where you can, where you can't ride and things like that. Is it a nice introduction for people?
Yeah, definitely. It's because you don't need to worry about where are we going. There's no, where you're going to go, and there's a definite destination in mind. So you can do a day or 4 days, or you could spend a week on doing it. I would say that if you're new to it, you might find a whole day of mixed riding is more tiring than you think. So if you planned on a whole week and you haven't done very much, then you're going to be quite tired at that. You also need to be a little bit realistic about how much to achieve in a day. If you're on a road bike, you can drive up to Scotland in a day on the motorway. It's no problem at all. You can click off 300, 400 miles, no problem at all. If you're doing the TET, you do need to be a bit realistic about what you can achieve in a day to enjoy the ride, and also not be giving yourself too much to do. So I'd reckon round about 150 miles a day is about right to enjoy it. Have time for a stop for lunchtime if the pubs are open. Get yourself some food and arrive at the evening point fresh enough to enjoy the evening. This isn't meant to be an endurance event. It's meant to be enjoyable. So don't plan on 250 miles a day and just find yourself rushing in the evening and not enjoying things.
I think that's one of the things I've enjoyed most about editing your pieces as editor of ABR, about riding the TET, is along with great descriptions of the trails and the landscapes you pass through, you spend an awful lot of time talking about the food and beer as well, which is great. It seems to be you live on curry, cake and beer in the evenings, which sounds like a good holiday, to be honest with you.
Yeah, what more would you want from a biking holiday? So, and just, you have to realise it is a trip. But say don't focus too much on on getting to the destination. It's the journey that's the fun bit. It's the messing around. It's when your mates go into a puddle which is deeper than they thought, and they get themselves drenched and so on. And it's that things that make a trip. If everything goes according to plan, that's not an adventure, is it?
Yeah, so we've got our route downloaded, we've got our bike, whatever bike we've got in the garage, as long as it's got some off-road capability. Yeah. If it's someone who's never done the TET before and never green lane before, and they're thinking about tyres, perhaps they've got some 80/20 tyres that came stock with their adventure bike, they're thinking about swapping it up for some knobblies. Is that something you'd recommend they do?
Yeah, I think definitely with tyres, you're bound to get a compromise between what a tyre can do. No matter what manufacturers say, there is going to be a compromise of what a tyre can do. And realistically, bearing in mind you are more likely to struggle on the off-road sections, I would say you should put your tyres towards being the best on the off-road sections and less good on the road sections. Because the roads, you can just reduce your speed and not go so fast. You can ride not full knobblies on the road with any issues. What you can't do is ride road tyres on slippery rocks and mud and stuff like that. So I'd always say compromise towards the best for the off-road sections, which might not be as good on the road sections, because you can always get along a road. It's tarmac, so it's not going to be any issue. But say if you go to sort of really smooth profile dual sport tyres, which look nice and chunky, you might find if it gets slippery, they're not quite as grippy as the manufacturer would have you believe. I've been caught out. I had some great tyres on, but I put brand new mousses on, and the thing was like a bullet. So that's another thing. You've got to be prepared to change things around, be prepared to drop the tyre pressures down if you're on the bike, in order to, because it's not, it's different terrain. So one bit might be muddy, one bit might be rocky, but certainly the slant, I would say, and that to a certain extent goes with the size of bike. The slant should be how good is it off road, because you'll get yourself caught out off road. You never get yourself caught out on the road.
Okay, so I reckon we could sit here and talk about tyres and bikes and whatnot for hours on end.
Yeah.
But this is a video podcast about the Trans Euro Trail. Yeah. But I just wanted to ask you one more question about bikes. Yeah. In one of your long-term reviews of your bikes in Adventure Bike Rider magazine, you said that, if I remember rightly, the Honda CRF 450L you felt was the ultimate Trans Euro Trail machine. Could you just explain a little bit why that was? What attributes it had to make it so good?
I think the thing is with a 450 or a 500cc off-road bike, you've got the best of both worlds. It's good on the road. It'll hold 50-60 miles an hour easily on the road, even on knobblies. And the last time I went, I was on full knobblies both ends. So in Dunlop Geomaxes both ends to get that one. It's got enough power, but it's light enough you can still lift the thing around. It's not as light as a full-on enduro bike, but it's light enough that if you get yourself into problems, you can lift the back and lift it over. And the conditions can vary. When we did some on the KTM 690, that was good, and then we got a downpour, and it was on really slippery rocks and chalk. And then the bike was really quite difficult to control, and there is a problem with the bikes like the 701 and 690 with that tank at the back. It's heavy at the back, so if you need to lift the back end out of difficulties, and you're lifting 16 litres of fuel and a back wheel and your luggage, it's a lot to get in. You won't get into lots of difficulties like that, but in terms of enjoying it, the 450 worked really well. It's a bike that's been sort of was always sort of underestimated in a way, but I found that just to be such an enjoyable bike. You could load up luggage on it, put a little nose fairing to keep a little bit of the rain and the wind off me, and cover up the sat nav equipment. And it just worked really well. The 690, when he did it across the north of the country, worked really well as well. So, but again, there's a bit of a theme here that the smaller bikes worked a little bit better than say the 660. When I was on the 660 Tenere, I was quite pleased. I had two guys with me who were on a Honda 250 and an SWM 300, because it was almost like bring along the crew. So when I got into difficulty with the 660, I had somebody to help me pick the thing up. Don't underestimate how difficult it is to pick a bike when it's upside down, and you're tired, okay? And that's the difficulty with 200 kilo bike compared to a 150 or 120 kilo bike. It's fine when things are going well. If they don't go so well, and it's 5 o'clock and you want to get to your bed and breakfast, you'll find that bike weighs about 500 kilos.
You were buying the beers that night, I assume.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. And one of my favourite images from the photos you sent from your travels that we put in the magazine was a friend of yours. Now, am I remembering correctly that he was wearing white jeans, a leather jacket, an open face helmet, and he was on a Honda CB500X. And despite that, he looked like he was having amazing fun. He
did. John joined us on two parts of the trip. He joined us on the first part when we did. I was on the Tenere, and he joined us from Dover in the same outfit as well. Open face helmet, same white jeans. And the Dover one is okay for a while. Then you get this really slippery slope, and he was on full on road tyres. He hadn't even swapped for dual sports. It was just what are you doing, John? So he was a constant source of difficulty that he would get himself sorted out. It wasn't even like he had the Rally Raid, the adventurized version of that 500X. It was fairly bog standard, and it wasn't the bike for the job, certainly in winter. He joined us again on the Wales section. And again, joined us on the second day. It was all absolutely fine, but we were all trying to get away from him because he knew he was going to get into difficulties. And then when he got into difficulties, we go like, guys. So, yeah, and he did manage to actually plough his way through the deepest of puddle. And really, it just looked like a dirty protest. His white trousers. Who wears white trousers on an adventure bike? John does, obviously. And he was just absolutely covered in the stuff. And in order to save space, he hadn't bought different shoes for the evening, so his little desert boots that he wore in the day, he was wearing in the evening. Just the basic. But
covered in muck. He had a great time there.
He enjoyed it. So that's all he meant to do. It wouldn't be a way I'd choose to enjoy myself.
Oh no! Oh well, and that kind of leads into thinking about gear for the trip. So you're planning your Trans Euro Trail trip in the UK. You mentioned luggage earlier. You mentioned your friend in his white trousers. What would you say is kind of is there an ideal setup for riding the Tet, particularly if you're looking to do a stretch over 3, 4, 5 days or something like that?
I guess it depends on how much of a purist you want to do it. There are people who want to do the Tet and want to do it all, like sort of carry everything with them and camp at night and that sort of thing. And that's an experience, absolutely fine. In the UK, when you can have those wet days and those cold days, even in the summer, that's quite a risk that you might end up being constantly cold for those four days. I would always, when we've done it, what we've planned on having bed and breakfast in the evening. Yeah. Now, on the first couple of trips, what we did, we Matt booked things in advance, so we knew where we were going to stay each night. After doing that a couple of times on a couple of 4-day trips, we found it was put a little bit of pressure at the end of the day, as we had to get to a definite destination. So what we went on the third and fourth, get to about 4 or 5 o'clock in the day, look where we are, look where we plan to finish, go onto booking.com and book something up, because there's enough options there to be able to do it. If you go outside school, if you go in school holidays, you could be caught out with it. But go outside school holidays when the trails are nice and quiet and there's options for the B&B, then we found it worked quite well. Okay, it's 4 o'clock. Where do you want to be? Another 50 miles, another 30 miles on from here. Yeah, we've got twin rooms and booked it up like that way. If you want to do the campsites, you might need to book in advance and plan definitely where you're going to go. But inevitably, if you're going to camp, you're going to have to carry everything with you. It's going to have to be that sleeping bag. It's going to have to be, you might want to do it on a bivvy bag. You might want to do it under tarp. You might want a tent. But either way, it's going to have to be you carrying that on the bike. And on the small bikes, that's going to be a bit of an issue. Lots, if you've got on an adventure bike, you've got lots of luggage carrying capacity. But then on a bike that already weighs 200 plus kilos, you're going to be putting on the tent and all that stuff. And again, it comes back to the fine when it's upright, not so good when it's on its side. So for the enjoyment of the trip, I'd much prefer to have just change of clothes and a sponge bag and that sort of thing on the bike. Just get somewhere, have a nice shower, and go for a pint in the curry.
Yeah. And did you find there's plenty of accommodation options along the route?
Yeah, absolutely. We had rough ideas when we were looking to end up based on that 150 miles a day or 200 odd kilometres a day. So we know roughly where we went to be, and on occasions we didn't get as far as we thought, but most of the time we roughly got to where we are, and that's a thing for Matt doing his planning and being realistic. If we planned on further, we'd just have to get to about 5 o'clock in the evening, and then trying to look, okay, we've got another 50 miles to go to get to our destination. And if you rush at the end of the day when you're tired, that's when the mistakes happen. You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be thinking, I've got to get there. Barely checking the hotel, get something to eat and stuff like that. It's meant to be a holiday. It's meant to be fun. So don't give yourself too much to do. In terms of what you put on the bike, with a smaller bike, you like to go for soft luggage. So I've got the tank bag there, the Motorhouse tank bag behind it, tank bag there, and something on the seat behind. I tend to put stuff in the middle of the bike, nice and high, which means if you are paddling, you've got the space to it. If you go for low down panniers, that keeps the weight lower, close to the centre of gravity. But then if you are having to do a little bit of paddling around on harder sections, they get in the way. There's not too much hard on it. And if you look at what the guys have taken on our trips, there's a variety of stuff. Matt has had camo bags on the front and an enduro roll on the back. Chris, who comes along, Chris seems to purchase most of his luggage from either Aldi or middle of Lidl or jumble sales or eBay. So he's got a collection of all kinds of stuff. It doesn't really necessarily matter, but certainly the soft stuff kind of works better for the smaller bikes, and it doesn't hurt you if you happen to fall off on it, and you can move stuff around. So soft stuff in there, but you don't need that much realistically. Pair of jeans and a jumper for the evening, enough clean underwear for the trip. But beyond that, and a pair of shoes, because you don't want to be going to the pub wearing the same stuff you've had on all day. And obviously getting the waterproofs, carry the waterproofs with you. You don't want to wear them all the time. We've planned on, for the most part, doing it in the summer months rather than the winter months, and we'd also plan the first trip of the year after the clocks have gone back, because you've got that extra hour in the evening. So it works well for the summer for the UK.
Yeah, and in terms of the gear you're riding, you're wearing while you ride, obviously everyone has different preferences for their riding gear setup.
Yeah.
But can you take us through what you prefer to do with the Tet?
Yeah, I'll prefer to do an adventure riding jacket with padding in because it's it's not motocross, it's not enduro, but you still want to have that protection on your shoulders and on your elbows, the pointy bits, the normal stuff you to protect you, even the smallest off. If you hit your elbow, it's going to be possibly game over if you haven't got those elbow pads. So a decent adventure jacket with that on. You can go for the Under Armour with an unpadded jacket, but it's relatively easy to have a jacket with it all in. In terms of wear on the bottom, I tend to go with fixed knee pads actually strapped to my knees because I find them more comfortable rather than having the smaller ones. Because you are going, you ride quite a lot of rocky stuff. Your knees are going to be quite vulnerable. So if you rely on adventure trousers which have the knee pads floating around in them, it might not necessarily be in the right place when you fall off. So I've got some Liat dual axis which go on there, nice big thing to protect the knees, and adventure boots. And you want waterproof adventure boots because again, if you're riding for 4 days, what you don't want is having wet feet on day one. So waterproof socks and waterproof boots. I've got those Alpine style Corazols behind me. They work realistically well. Only a couple of buckles, but they're all day comfortable. I've tried it with motocross boots, but motocross boots aren't particularly waterproof and a little bit over the top, a little bit cumbersome for walking around in. So adventure boots work well. A decent set of those. Helmet. I use an adventure helmet, but I use them with goggles because that's great for dust. It's nice and comfortable all day, but it does mean if it does chuck it down, you can pull the visor down on top of the goggles to give you that a level protection. But I like the flexibility that goggles and with and without. It means if it's going darker in the evening, you can lose the goggles and just go with the clear visor. So motocross helmet, if it was really hot, absolutely fine. But if it's chucking it down, you're quite pleased to have that visor come down on the front.
Yeah. Okay. So the TED itself, it begins in. Am I right in thinking it begins in the UK, New Haven, on the south coast?
Well, no, Dover actually. It actually starts right down at Dover. The original TET, when we started of it, there was less of the TET than there is now. It's growing, not exponentially, but it is growing. So originally, it started down in Dover, right at the ferry terminal, and route this way all the way across through the bottom of Bristol, over into Chepstow, around into Wales, and so we've done it in a section. We did Dover to Chepstow in one section, then we did Chepstow up to Crewe in another section, and then Crewe all the way up to Kendal, so that took in Yorkshire and Lancashire and all around there up to the Lake District, and then the final section from Kendal all the way across to where it finishes, which is Newcastle on Tyne, again at the ferry port, with a view that you could go on the ferry somewhere else. So that way it was originally. Since then, there's been additional puts in. So again, it's James Hicks who's been responsible for this. He's put in an additional bit, the Great Western Trail, which goes from Bristol all the way down to Land's End and back. Put another loop down in there. There's also a section that's come in now, the Great Northern Trail, which is taking a lot more up towards the Lake District and up there. And I think the third bit now, I think is called the Tetty Trail, which goes a little bit further into right the way over into West Wales. So when we think we've done it all, there's a little bit more to do, but that's great. And I've ridden bits of it twice. My southern trip that I did recently was riding it the other way from Bristol across to Dover, because we'd originally planned to do something else. The lockdown changed around, so just the two of us did the southern trip in reverse. And clearly, it's a different experience riding those trails in reverse, because the uphills become downhills, the downhills become uphills, and the route has changed since we first did it 3 years ago.
Yeah, I remember in the most recent story you wrote for the magazine you went from Bristol actually across the south of England to Dover, and you said this was probably the most approachable section of the TET. So if you were a beginner and you don't mind travelling to a different part of the country when we're allowed to, is that a section that you would recommend to begin with?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are still some tricky sections. There's some hills, certainly around sort of South Gloucestershire up and around Stroud. There were some nasty ones up there. But for the most part of all the sections we rode, the Southern TET is the least challenging. There is a lot on Salisbury Plain, and if you've had the rain, and anybody who's ridden Salisbury Plain when it's been getting wet will know just how challenging that can be, because that clay, it's great in the thing, but those endless lines of ruts, if you've got wet conditions and a big bike and you're a bit tired. So I wouldn't say it was easy, but in terms of that, because the terrain in the south of England is less extreme than say in Wales and in the north of England, because it's generally quite a lot flatter down in the south, then the lanes are that little bit less challenging and a little bit easier. There are some snotty ones, and one just outside Dover really nearly defeated us because we just came into it and it had rained, and that was a chalk hill, no grip whatsoever, all over the place, bike going all over the place, and it was just like we're gonna break a collarbone within sight of Dover on this one. It really felt like that, But yes, definitely. I wouldn't say do the Welsh one straight away if you're fresh to it, because you'll end up having to miss out quite a few bits of it, because the scenery in Wales is that much bigger, and so the trails are sometimes a little bit harder.
I remember perhaps my favourite photographs from your various Tet travels would be when you took on the Great Western Trail, which is the spur that runs down from basically Bristol, is that right? Yeah. Down to Land's End and then loops back on itself. And just seeing the photos from those sunken lanes in Dorset and Devon looks spectacular. Was it one of the most picturesque sections of the Tet you've ridden?
Yeah, I think it was really beautiful. We had great weather, and again, we've been so lucky with the Tet. We have done this is like 6 trips of the Tet, and we've had probably 2 hours of rain in the whole thing. We've just been incredibly lucky, and it makes it. There are people who love riding in wet conditions and rain. I'm not one of those. I'd much prefer to stay dry. I'll take dust every time over snotty conditions. I'm not going to say it's enjoyable at all. So we had great weather. Unfortunately, on that one, Matt started off with his bike with some issues. When he started out thinking like, that ain't going to make it, and he was like, yeah, I'll be fine. No, sure enough, he didn't. So he had to bail out relatively early. But again, that's one of the things that's helpful, that we all had versions of the Tet. We wasn't just relying on the run leader to take us to the place. We've got the map as well. So his bike ended up dying on the way, and in a way, it died just before we got all to those lovely lanes that are round about in that area in Dorset. Yeah, the sunken lanes were just absolutely wonderful. There is a slight difficulty that those really beautiful places, you do tend to find the walkers enjoying the same lanes, and sometimes there can be a little bit of friction between us riding legal lanes and people walking on those lanes. But they are shared use, and you just need to be careful about it. Be respectful for the horse riders. If there's a horse around, cut your engine, get yourself out of the way, get the horse out of the way, and everybody will be happy. The same with walkers. If you rip past them and cover them in mud, that ain't going to give a good impression for motorcyclists. It's not going to make anybody's day. They're going to be pissed off. You're going to feel very clever about it. So just be respectful and say it's the prettier the lane, the more likely there'll be other people enjoying it. And again, that's one of those reasons why you might want to do it sort of midweek. It's a good idea. Less walkers around midweek and outside school holidays. So there'll be less people around and less possible conflict. You're allowed to be there. It's legal, but sometimes there can be that misunderstanding from people that you are legal and you are meant to be there. So just be sensible about how you ride with other people and when you plan your trips.
Yeah. What's been the general reaction from sort of locals as you've been riding? Because I assume these lanes are probably seeing a little bit more use than before. But also, there's people there staying in local pubs, kind of spending money in local businesses and benefiting the communities.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that the Tet being the resource it is, you'd see more people. We've only seen, on all those trips we've done, we've seen 4 people. Oh, no way. 4 other riders doing the Tet. That's it. So realistically, the idea that it's becomes some sort of motorway because of it just simply isn't the case. We might see other trail riders because there are lanes that local trail riders would use. Yeah. But in terms of stopping and chatting to people, say 4 people on those 2,000 odd miles that we've done on the Tet who are actually doing the same thing. So it's not heavily used, but inevitably it's on lanes that trail riders and others would use. In terms of interacting with other people, if you're respectful about it, if you stop and chat and tell them what you're doing, that's the way about it. with shared use, you've got to be prepared to do that, to stop and turn off the engines, take off those goggles, maybe take off the helmet. They might think it's a load of kids on motocross bike when they realise it's a load of 50-year-old guys on trail bikes who are just waiting to get a fish finger
Very
sandwich.
polite, yeah.
Yeah, just don't be daft about it realistically. But we'd hope that people were doing that anyway. Be respectful of other people enjoying the country in the same way that you are.
So, Julian, you've ridden lots of the TET through England and through Wales. What's your favourite bit? Which part would you recommend to someone taking off on it for the first time?
Well, I think for the first time, the southern bit is good. But if you've actually done a little bit of off-road riding, if you're confident with your bike and you haven't got a fully loaded GSA that you haven't necessarily taken further than the tarmac, I think the Welsh bit is absolutely glorious. I'm a sucker for riding in Wales anyway. We're coming from Bristol. We do it a lot. We'll go over there for long weekends. All the riding around Rayhead, around Llanerchinda Farm or Dolgelly. There's beautiful stuff out there. The scenery, it truly is God's own country. So I'd have to say the Welsh bit. We did it in the Welsh section in 4 bits. So starting from Bristol, the first section from Chepstow across to Llandovery, stayed overnight in Llandovery. The second bit from Llandovery up to Machynlleth, stayed overnight in that one, and then the third night over just inside Wales, just on the Cheshire border, and then finished up in Crewe. But all that bit through that, the further we got to Crewe, the bit more industrial it became, and the lesser the lanes. But the bit all the way up through Wales, just absolutely glorious. We were lucky, really good weather, so things like the splashes in Stratford, Florida, were not too challenging. Good weather is always going to help a trip. But if you don't enjoy riding in that landscape in there, then you need another hobby, because it's a great thing to be doing. The caveat to that is that the Great Western Trail that we've just done, that all the way down to Land's End, there is something about doing that, getting to a destination in the same way that Pat and I just recently went from Bristol all the way across to Dover. Starting off there and finishing at a definite destination, Land's End, is really quite nice. In the same way that when we crossed over from the Lake District over to finish in Newcastle on Tyne, it's the whole thing of crossing a country or getting right to the bottom, the most westerly point of the UK. But pick any bit of the TET, and you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, so if someone's looking to do a UK route this summer, particularly if we don't know how far we could be able to go abroad, and they've got the option of perhaps heading up to the NC 500 or heading to the lakes and the moors and whatnot, would you recommend riding the Trans-Euro Trail in the UK instead? Is it that good?
I think it's definitely worthwhile, and something that is on your doorstep. It's there for you, and you can take it as much as you want. If you want to do the whole lot, if you want to take 2 weeks off work with your mates and try and crack the whole thing, absolutely fine. If you just want to fancy doing a day, have a look how close the TET comes to you. Just plan on doing a trip. The good thing, if you're on a bigger adventure bike, it means that you can drive to your destination, do a bit of the TET, and then drive home. If you're on a trail bike, yeah, you might want to leave your bike in a location and maybe do 1 day out and 1 day back. Certainly from Bristol, if you did the Llandovery thing, you could drive from Bristol all the way across to Llandovery, stay overnight in Llandovery, and follow the trail back. It will feel different, the same as I've said. But if you fancy going on longer trips, the whole thing of one-way van hire works relatively well. Do some research into the normal suppliers. You can drive to a place, pick up a van, and drive it back.
How does it rank among the other journeys you've done? I've edited pieces in Adventure Bike Rider magazine from Mongolia, from Cambodia, from Nepal. How does riding the TET compare to those overseas adventures?
I think it's really hard to compare those, because the whole thing of going across the other side of the world to ride in Mongolia, to ride in those places, I feel so privileged to have done that, and to taken on riding, my favourite hobby in places I've never been to before. So it's inevitable that bringing your sort of horizons down to domestic stuff is not necessarily as exciting, but it can be just as fun. At the moment, we have to realise that for quite a long period of time, there's going to be less possibilities of us going to those far-flung places. Until the situation settles around across the world, we're not necessarily going to be able to travel to the other side of the world for those adventures. So I think realistically, celebrating and enjoying what's on our doorstep makes an awful lot of sense. And why wouldn't you? We live in a beautiful country. There's fantastic parts of it, and with the Trans-European Trail, you get the chance to experience those bits. And when things open up slightly, you don't have to go to the other side of the world. You could just cross the channel, go across the channel, or get a ferry and ride the French Tete. Get a loop of the French Tete. We've planned on looking at one of getting across to Le Havre, and then doing one which finishes up around Calais, and that's all possible. And we could probably do it on trail bikes or whatever we got at the time. It's quite achievable. An achievable adventure is a good way to start adventures, because once you get the hang of it, and once you start doing it, you think, wow, this is good. What it would be like if I did it in France? What it would be like if I did it in Spain? Could I do this in India? And I think that's the thing. We've all got bikes which are capable of far more than sometimes we actually ask of them. So the Tete is a good way of just dipping your toe into the water and saying, look, okay, and then think, God, this is great. I want to do more of this. So yeah. As a gift to the UK, I can't thank the people, the founders and the linesmen of the Tete enough. It is a fantastic gift to motorcycling, and you should go out and ride it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed living vicariously through your pieces in Adventure Bike Rider magazine. I've dabbled a bit in it myself, but I'm determined that this year I'll be riding a lot more of it here in the UK. Hopefully we'll be able to catch up and go for a spin together on some sections. But for now, thanks so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you on the road sometime soon.
Cheers, James.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the ABR Garage. And remember, you can read all of Julian's Trans-Euro Trail stories instantly on your phone, your tablet or your computer by signing up for an ABR Digital Library membership. You'll also get instant access to every issue of Adventure Bike Rider magazine ever published. Simply go to www.adventurebikerider.com/shop. I'll see you next time.